The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight, we explore the meaning behind the phrase Black excellence. Then, a new episode of our series, Forgotten War. That's ahead on the agenda. If you've ever scrolled through social media, you may have come across the hashtag Black excellence. The phrase emerged out of the civil rights movement of the 1960s, and it's now a term used to amplify and celebrate the achievements of black people. It gained prominence during the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020. School programs are named after it. But, question, does black excellence encourage black people to sacrifice their mental health for the sake of societal expectations? Can the term do more harm than good? To discuss, we've assembled a group of excellent black individuals, starting with Nathan Andrews, Associate Professor in the Department of Political Science at McMaster University in Hamilton. He joins us on the line from Vancouver, BC. In the nation's capital, Gerald Grant, Principal Investigator and co-lead of the Black Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub and Professor of Information Systems at the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. And with us here in the studio, Cheryl Thompson, Associate Professor in the School of Performance at Toronto Metropolitan University, and Tracy Moore, host at City TV here in Toronto. And it's great to welcome you two here to our studio and to our friends in Points Beyond. Thanks for joining us tonight here on TVO. Tracy, you first. You do not hear people use the expression white excellence, but apparently black excellence is a thing.
Sure is.
How come?
Well, can we just start with the definition?
Fire away.
I looked up a definition, and this is it. Black excellence is the embodiment of resilience through trauma, confrontation of adversity, and perseverance through struggles, while consistently pushing the boundaries of progress to achieve our goals. Who wants to do that? As soon as I read that, that sounds to me so exhausting. And Doc, you know this experience, and I know this experience, and I'm sure the professors on the line know the experience as well. Black excellence was something I think that was coined to uplift, and it has in many ways become a bit of a prison. It's exhausting to think that you have to look at our experience from a gaze from outside of our community. We need to actually put ourselves in front of this idea of excellence. I'm into black mediocrity. I want to be able to just live, get up, go to work, pay my taxes, and not be penalized for that.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to get back to black mediocrity. But first, more on black excellence. Do you relate to this?
I completely relate to it, and I think, to your point, if you think about the 1960s, you needed something to aspire to, right? Like black excellence is aspirational, and that's great. But my question is, it doesn't leave room for mistakes. So now the black person has to be perfect in everything that they do. One little mistake, it's like you're personally flawed. You didn't make a mistake, something's actually wrong with you because you're not excellent. Whereas I look around at colleagues who are not black, and they could be average.
They're allowed to be, you say.
They're allowed to be average.
Society lets them be.
That is perfectly, or they could be great, or they could be poor. It doesn't matter, right? They could be the range of experiences. With us, we're held to such a standard that after a while, it really does feel like a prison that you're in.
Nathan, how do you weigh in on this?
So my perspective is similar, actually. And I also think that there is the need for the celebration of excellence, right? So because especially in academia, black people have often been underrepresented. Their contributions have not been celebrated well enough. So I think that sort of concept or hashtag helps to celebrate those contributions and to highlight that, oh, these people are also contributing. But then the problem is that the problem is the system that we live in that makes it worth bringing up such hashtags, right? Because ideally, we should be in a system where every contribution is celebrated. If people don't want to achieve anything at all, that should also be fine. But we live in a system where whiteness is the mainstream, and in such a system, white excellence is sort of considered to be the status quo. So for a black person is expected to do way more and to stand out and to be extraordinary, right? So it's sort of the notion of Black exceptionalism that my colleagues have spoken to that makes it problematic. And it really conceals systemic barriers and pressures that we all face and sort of places us in a very unique position. And at the same time, it multiplies the institutional and societal expectations of Black people that we need to do more. Look at this person. He's achieved all that. You can also do it. And then we forget about the systemic problems that would prevent every Black person or most Black people from achieving those specific goals.
Gerald, let me get your take on this notion of Black excellence. What do you think?
Well, being excellent is a good thing, right? Being excellent at your work and your craft is something that is good. But this idea, this exceptional idea of Black excellence, I think, as my colleagues have said, is problematic in many ways. It can be psychologically damaging to people, because I've seen Black young people especially who find that, they might not have achieved the level that they're looking for, or that expectations that are on them to achieve, they feel like they have not done anything, that they're not good enough when they're doing really excellent work, if we were to take it, like everybody else. So I think I definitely feel that we need to be excellent in what we do, to be our best selves. But this expectation of being exceptional, to just gain half, to be twice as good for half the rewards, as the saying goes, is not something that we should push too far.
Now, as we continue our conversation, we also know how tough it is to get around this capital city of ours. So let me welcome Mitzi Hunter, who has just arrived. She's the president and CEO at the Canadian Women's Foundation. You know her, of course, as a former Ontario cabinet minister, and I believe a board member here at TVO once upon a time.
6 years.
6 years here. Okay, Mitzi, great to see you again. Weigh in on this, if you would, from the standpoint of the following. I wonder if the lack of comfort I'm hearing around this literal and metaphorical table about Black excellence is because there's somehow a view out there that it's so rare we have to put a label on it. Do you feel that from time to time?
Not at this stage. When I think of Black excellence, I think about who is it for? And oftentimes it's really an aspirational notion that is put out there. And it does recognize that it's challenging. It's challenging to exist in society, to be a woman, to be a Black woman, to be a Black boy, a Black man, because there are impressions that are put upon us that may not reflect the reality of who we are. Put upon you by whom? Society.
Everybody else.
There are biases. I mean, many of them are well documented. Just look at policing. It was recognized and reported. Anytime you look at disaggregated data of any kind, health, education, employment, whatever statistic, prison records, anything, you recognize that there are biases in the society that are disproportionately affecting people. And so the notion of Black excellence is a counter to that. And, I think of young people and, making sure that they feel that they can live and exist in society and to live up to their full potential and to exist without barrier.
Does part of your unhappiness or taking offense at this term relate to the thing I just mentioned, in that there's this sense that Black excellence is not commonplace enough in our society, and therefore we have to call it something and name it so that one can take pride?
I think from our perspective, I understand where the notion came from. We are not recognized in the wider society, and our achievements aren't recognized, and our inventors and our scientists and our doctors and our history and our legacies aren't recognized. So I understand where the notion of Black excellence came from, and I'm sure it came from inside our community. Am I right? So if it comes from inside of our community, it is something that was supposed to be aspirational, as both of you have mentioned, and something that's supposed to make us feel a sense of pride. You need the self-esteem, you need the pride in order for us to be able to go forward in life. But I think what it's become now is it's become something that feels almost like it is from the white gaze looking at us. And if that is the situation, then we need out.
Save it.
We need out. What I'm saying is we need to come up with our own notions of what we feel are success, and they are not necessarily going to be Serena Williams and Simone Biles. I should be able to get through life and achieve whatever I want to achieve, or not much at all, and still be respected as an individual and not be harassed in the streets and be able to stand in the mall and maybe not spend any money without being chased out by a security guard. Like, we have to be able to move through life like other people can move through life.
Well, that relates to excellence versus exceptionalism.
Exactly. And that's what I was going to say. The reality is black people are excellent. Take
100%.
any field, right? You can see excellence in any field, any age, right? That's not the problem. Really, black excellence for me is like a code for black exceptionalism. So they take the exception and now they want to hold that person and say, this is the standard that now we're going to sort of measure every black person up against. Or conversely, they say, it's because you're so exceptional why you got here. So you're like a different black person, right? Like, how did you do this as a black person? You're so exceptional. And it's like, well, I went to public school. I had black parents and black friends. I did the same things that everyone else did, just like my white colleagues who are exceptional. So this is where it gets into that tricky difference between excellence and exceptionalism. I want to be excellent. I don't want to be exceptional. I don't want to be this outlier. And I feel sometimes, especially in academia, the black person who wins awards and is always, their name is everywhere, they become this unicorn. They have no peer group. They have no one to talk to. They are literally marooned in their exceptionalism. And I don't think that's excellent, because every black person, in my opinion, if we're going to thrive, if you take that original definition from the 1960s, why did it come out of the 1960s? Because there was so much collectivism. There was black community organizing, and they thought of themselves as a whole, and everything was moving in unison. Now, in my opinion, there is so much individualism that they want to pluck out the one black person and just see them as an individual, not as a community.
Let me get Nathan to follow up in this regard, and we're going to peel back the curtain of academia a bit here and find out about academic tokenism. How do you see it? What do you think of it?
Well, so that is a quintessential aspect of black excellence, because I mean, the idea of being a black icon, which, my colleague was referring to, is like you are the exceptional case in a department. And for me, I'm a beneficiary of a cohort hire at McMaster, black cohort hire. So I can speak to that later on, but I just want to say that was a time when, like, I entered the institution, I entered the department, and then I felt like I was the only black professor. And so that way you are, well, in that department, not the whole school, of course, but you are the person that they go to for certain types of things. So you are the person they go to, they want to have a black face, or they have some initiatives going on and they want to show diversity. You are the person they will call upon. That feels tokenistic, right? In a way. And that really adds to the pressure that you experience as an academic, because I mean, on top of all the work you have to do as an academic, publish, go to conference, teach, you're not going to get a teaching reduction because you are doing all these things as a token, as a black token, but they still expect you to, and they expect you to do it at a very exceptional or at a very excellent level. And that becomes problematic. If there's a chance for me to just share a little bit of my experience. So in my own case, I grew up in Ghana. I had my higher education in Ghana until my early 20s before I came to Canada. So everything around me, everything I was aspiring to was black. Everyone that I saw that I wanted to be a person was a black person. So it wasn't really an exceptional case. I came to Canada and I noticed it is really exceptional in a way, because if you look at academia, even though you have high school people at that level, there's lots of black people, lots of people from all races. When they go up to the university level and beyond that to PhD, the number reduces. And I think that's where this idea of excellence comes from, because like the number has reduced. How come these people were able to make it through all the struggles and all the hindrances that would prevent people from getting there, right? So, and that's why when you get to that point, you become a token, because you are seen to have thrived. And like the definition that was shared earlier on, you have made it through this whole system that would typically prevent you from getting that far. But that the notion of tokenism is a problem, and it causes a lot of mental health issues for people that are in these positions.
Let me follow up with Gerald then. How should Black excellence be reframed or reconsidered to make it more palatable?
Well, I don't know if we want to make Black excellence more palatable in the sense that we've been talking about it. When I started out, when I went to school to be where I am, I didn't think about this notion of Black excellence in the sense that we've been discussing it. I thought about it as a way, as trying to achieve what I wanted to be as a person, for myself. I wanted to be an academic, to live the life of an academic just like everybody else who are academics. I didn't go there to be a Black academic or anything like that. I wanted to be at one of the best schools in the world, and that's what I did. And I think of myself that way. The challenge is that you're made a token by those who are looking on, because of many experiences I've had, going to different schools or so on. You're not given the same opportunities. You're always, what should I say? The structures, the institutions that are around in academia are not there to help you to get along just like everybody else. And you have to be treated, you're treated really as the exception. One thing I'd like to say is that this is an issue that is relevant to here. Just this last week, I was in the Caribbean at a conference of excellent Black people talking about AI. And I didn't, this whole notion of exceptionalism was not there. We were a whole bunch of people in the space talking about artificial intelligence and its impact on the South. And it was just such an excellent feeling. It was such a great place to be without feeling like you're a token. I would say that excellence is built in community. And I think someone referenced that already. Mm-hmm. With the mentoring and all around support. And I think that's what we need to start looking more to, building networks that will uplift our excellent work.
Can I just add to
Sure.
that just quickly? Because I think one of the things you have to understand in terms of if we're talking about academia, it starts in grad school. Right? Like if you're a Black PhD student in Canada, you're probably the only one in that program. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's someone else, but they're doing something different. So you're already kind of set up to feel a little tokenized. The moment you enter undergrad is different, right? And I'm just a quick story. I remember when I have a PhD from McGill University.
That's not bad.
That's not bad. When I walked that graduation stage, the crowd gasped.
Come on.
There was a noticeable gasp because there were so many graduates and I was the only Black one. And they were just shocked. Like, I think it was just a complete shock. Like, McGill is producing this because they'd never seen it before. I was the only PhD.
What year was that?
That was 2015.
That's not that long ago.
That's not that long ago.
Gosh, okay.
And I was the only one. So I think that's
gasping.
part of the issue too.
I want to take Mitzi Hunter down memory lane here for a little bit. And that is, when you were at the cabinet table in Kathleen Wynne's government, were you the only Black face at the table?
Yes, I was no. I wasn't the only Black face at the cabinet table because
Right.
Michael Coteau was my
Michael
colleague.
was there as well.
I was the only Black woman. And, I'm not surprised at the experience that you've had, because if you go back to universities in this country, at one point they weren't accepting Black students in programs in medicine and law.
That's right.
And that's why we now have the Scarborough Charter, which 54 universities and colleges have signed on to correct those wrongs of the past and to even the playing field, because it was so uneven.
My follow-up question for you was, and I'm going to date myself a bit here, but I do remember covering Alvin Curling's swearing in as the first black cabinet minister in Ontario history almost 40 years ago. And I remember talking to him years later, and he said, I had a headache every day I showed up for work in the first year that I was a cabinet minister because I felt so much pressure not to disappoint the members of my broader community. And I'm wondering whether you felt that same thing at the cabinet table, that pressure to be excellent.
I didn't, because Alvin Curling had been there, Marianne Chambers, Margaret Best. I grew up in Scarborough. Zanena Conde. I grew up in Scarborough, where I saw Alvin Curling, Dr. Alvin Curling. I, met with Dr. Jean Augustine. I had the opportunity to really touch those incredible role models, and that's why I hold the premise that, what are we talking about Black excellence for? I believe it is for that generation that is coming up, because they need to see it to be it, and it's a very important concept. Our history that is real has created uneven playing fields. I'm sure you know that Leonard Braithwaite was the person who called out exactly the discrimination built into the education system, and saying that we don't need segregated laws on our books, because that is the history of education in Ontario. And so there is a reason why we have to hold these new archetypes and create new realities and aspirations. And yes, it is exhausting, and it's a weight that we carry, but there's a reason, because there's a future generation that is looking to us.
Tracy, you're one of the, you wanted to say something.
I was actually going to say I felt all the pressure. I felt it every single day from the minute I walked in to start hosting Cityline. It was prevalent, it was in front of me, it was in my head, it was almost debilitating. I had to intentionally shut it off every day, because I was the only Black presence in that room. None of the camera crews, none of the producers, none of the audience. It was me. Yeah. And I felt my community, the hope they had put in me to carry out this role. I really did not feel there was any room for error.
Now, did that come from outside or inside? Both.
Both. I mean, I am raised by hardworking Jamaican immigrants. My dad took one sick day, and I think it was before I was born in 1975. So he's a mechanical engineer. He went to work every day. My mom as well, 30 plus years working in hospitals. And so the work ethic it's in there, and there is no such thing as not showing up. And so for me, that's the internal struggle I had. But externally, I felt like I had to represent. Like, this was a very big deal for people to be doing lifestyle television.
And you did.
I did.
You did.
But the barriers
Tracy,
I had to deal with, for sure. I did it,
yes.
honey, and I'm so happy I did it, and I'm very proud of my record, but I don't want my kids to feel that amount of pressure while they are going through life. I think it is a beautiful thing when you can sit back and have the space to rest, to daydream, to really think about where you want to spend your time and energy on this planet Earth. And I think that to me is the true wealth. That to me is true excellence. That to me is you have arrived when you have the opportunity to sit back and really imagine and dream what you would like your reality to be like, rather than having this pressure internally and externally to constantly be at the top.
Let me put that to Cheryl. When you got that gasp, when you went up on stage to get your degree and you got that gasp, I wonder if there was a part of you that thought, I'm going to show these folks. Did you feel that pressure?
No, there was a part of me like, oh my goodness, get me off this stage. I'm surrounded by a white audience. Like, I just felt so, but you have to understand, I had spent 5 years in a program where I knew I was the only Black person. They just saw that for the first time and had that reaction. I had to live in that existence. And so for me, I feel so much of what you're saying, because as a Black academic, sometimes it does feel like that. There's so much pressure to always be sort of Black and intellectual and always be this thing. And the reality is that I always remind my Black students, remember, you're human first. So just lean into that. Like, you have the same insecurities problems, challenges as everyone else sitting in the room.
But the dean of the law school at your university is a black woman, right? You're not by yourself anymore.
Oh no, come on. No. We can't.
Well,
I mean, I don't know that person. We've never met. I mean, and that's just one person in a completely different field. And so what I'm saying to you is I'm talking about people that are in your network. And like, who's in your network? Are people going to know you? People that you went through the process with. For example, I have white colleagues. They went to grad school just like me. They are still friends with those people they went to grad school with, because they're like a cohort together.
And you are not.
I just have me.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have the new colleagues that I met. And so I've built my own networks. This is not a sob story. Like, I've built my own networks. I'm only pointing out is that when you are the only one, and I think I'm speaking to a lot of people who understand this feeling, the only one bears a lot of pressure to be perfect, and you can internalize that need to be perfect. And then your whole life ends up, not being very well self-care, sleep, taking care of yourself, and realizing that you actually don't have to be perfect. If you get through the struggle, which I did, you will meet other people, and they will be able to relate to you, and you can grow. So that's really the positive spin to what I'm saying.
Gerald, I see you trying to get in.
No, I just wanted, my first job back in Canada was at McGill, teaching at the business school. I stayed there for a year, and a lot of the issues that we're raising here might be connected to why I'm not there. But, I was the only one, of course, in the whole faculty, so I know what it feels like. What I would say, though, is that what I've tried to do is to build networks, and I think, Cheryl, you started to talk about that, is to build networks across the world. So I still have a great cohort from my days at the London School of Economics. In actual fact, we created a conference that we run every year with my colleagues who are not all, they're not black necessarily, but some of them people of color from different parts of the world. And we deliberately focus on bringing our conference to places like South Africa, like South America, to all of these places to build networks and to give people opportunity. And here in Canada, I'm now leading the Black Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. One of the things that I've done, because I realized that I was not going to, there was no one to replace me when I retire in my business school per se, right? Or in the community overall, in business schools across Canada. And therefore, in our programs, we have built in that graduate students, every project that we fund must have a Black graduate student or undergraduate student as part of that process to build that cohort of people who can then come up through the ranks. Because if they're not there right now in undergrad, they won't be there 10 years from now. And so we have to start building that network. And that's what I've been trying to do all my life across academia, both here and across the world where I have lots of activity going on.
Let me get Mitzi Hunter to follow up on that.
Well, I think I wanted to say the importance of disaggregated data is important in Canada. It's something that we don't have and we don't really measure. The Prosperity Project put out the Zero Scorecard report that looks at the corporate world and in terms of women and how women are progressing. And it turns out that when you look at Black, Indigenous women, it's less than a percentage. It's actually 0.8% of corporate leaders, board level, C-suite level, that are Black or that are Indigenous. And if we're not looking at one of the challenges in that scorecard is that there's no pipeline. So there's no putting forward that next generation of managers, directors, and leaders that can take on those roles. And so unless we are measuring and tracking and really being intentional about promotion, then that does not happen. And it's not because the talent is not there. It's because the talent needs to be sought out, and there needs to be a space of belonging and inclusion at all stratas in order for people to feel that they are included.
How do you fix that?
Well, I mean, you can be intentional. Just as our professor rightly said, you can actually require it, open space, have training, promotion, and support. And one of the things about our topic today about Black excellence is, society needs to accept that it is there, it exists, that people of all backgrounds are very talented and want to contribute. The opportunities to do so need to be created. Those doors need to be opened up. People need to be, in terms of where they're recruited from, sought out, given the opportunity, told about the opportunity so that they can compete fairly for it.
But I think the question is, is excellence something that you have to come innately inhabiting, or is it something that you can develop? Like what the pipeline is really that you're going to develop the talent. And I think often Black people, we're not given that room. It's like, you're not going to be excellent when you just finished university. You just started. So there's things to learn, but I feel like that's where this thing has this grip where even at that young age, you have to aspire to a level that is, someone's been working 10 years to aspire to, and you're supposed to graduate and already be there. It's such an unrealistic bar.
Double standard.
Complete double standard.
You're someone who spends some time on social media, right, Tracy?
Quite a bit,
Okay.
yes.
Do you ever on X use the hashtag Black excellence?
No, I don't think I ever do. First of all, I'm not on X. I got off of that app. That app does not work for me. But I would say on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, no, I would never hashtag Black excellence. And it's not because I'm not. I am excellent. We all are. I see excellence all the time. I see it in elementary school. I see it on sports fields. I see it at the gym. I see Black excellence everywhere. My parents are my absolute idols, and it's not because they are Fortune 500 CEOs. It is the way they approach living and what they have brought to my sister and I, a sense of contentment and gratitude that I think is a beautiful thing to aspire to. But you see, the things I'm talking about, they're difficult to quantify. And that's why Black excellence, to me, I have a bit of a pull and a tension with. So no, I don't hashtag anything Black excellence. I'm a Black woman in the world, and I'm living.
Nice.
That's what I am doing.
I like that.
I am living, I am loving, I am enjoying, I am resting, I'm alive. That's it. That's all that's expected of me.
Can I say, you sure are. You sure are. Right on.
Steve.
Right on. Nathan Andrews, can I get you to weigh in on that?
That's funny.
So I was going to make an initial point about how the way we're talking, I think some immigrant parents are probably sitting at home saying, what are they talking about? We want our kids to be excellent. We want them to win awards. We want them to be great and to be recognized by society because they've lived it and they know that, especially if you're a first generation academic. I grew up in a family. I'm the only person to have gotten a PhD in my family, even till date. So there's a lot of pressure on my shoulders. And if you have immigrant parents, you know that they will push you to do that. The challenge, though, is that the pressure is coming from internal and external. But then we celebrate excellence as an individualistic thing. I mean, that's what my colleagues have been saying so far. We should think of excellence as communal. And begin to think about the communities that make these people excellent and how do we recognize these communities that make these people excellent. So, if you think about community, you can begin to celebrate things such as Black joy, Black love, Black hope, all of those. Those can be hashtags. And I do use the Black excellence hashtag occasionally. I used it just last week, actually, because I think it's important to keep it in context, to understand that, yes, if someone is excellent and they are also Black, it needs to be celebrated, but that doesn't mean we should hold Black people to a different threshold. One example, McMaster did this cohort hire, and they have a program called Thrive. And the idea is to build a community for the new Black scholars that have come into the institution, but even some of the people that exist there already. Yeah. I think it's about 15 to 20 new scholars that they hired in the past 2 to 3 years. And that has been great because you get to be part of a community. You don't feel like an icon by yourself. You don't feel isolated, but you do feel like being part of a bigger community that is striving for change and transformation in academic spaces. So such a program is important, and it's a way to build community, even in the same time as we celebrating individual achievements.
Cheryl, I want to follow up with you on something that Mitzi said a little while ago, and that was She said she didn't feel those pressure headaches at the cabinet table because there had been others that came before her. The notion of having role models, how important is that to this conversation we're having?
Well, first of all, I do hashtag Black Excellence.
You're allowed. You're
Just
allowed.
putting it out there.
Okay.
Role models are everything. I see myself as a role model. Of course. I went to McGill. I have a PhD. That's a big deal.
Do your students see you that way?
Yes, they do.
They do.
They often do, and I take that seriously. And I want to. So for me, part of Black excellence that I would love is mentorship. Like, I think mentorship is so important. It kind of speaks to what you're saying, right? It's like, that's how you build the pipeline. If you like paying it forward, all of those old school things that my parents also brought me up thinking about, is that if you succeed, then you're supposed to help other people succeed, right? And I fully believe in that. However, sometimes in academia, you know, it just happens. I mean, it's happened to me where you go to a conference and you've read someone's work, like, you know, they were so fundamental in your learning, and then you meet them and you're like, oh. So you have this like cringiness that maybe they're not who you thought they were, kind of thing. So I always say to any young person who's looking for the role model, understand that they're also human. And you can like their work and separate it from maybe the person that maybe you realize they don't really, we're not the same type of person, but their work can stand up. And I think one of the things that I love about being an academic is that everything I do is legacy. Every article is really legacy, because when I'm gone, that article is still searchable.
Yeah.
When I write that book will still be read. So I take that legacy mindset very seriously. That's why I am productive. That's why I am excellent. I'm not thinking about the adoration so much as 20 years from now, when there's a Black student who doesn't know me, they don't even know who I am, they can still find my work and engage with it. And I think that's, to me, that's the community part that was mentioned. That's the mentorship. That's the excellence that takes it out of one person and thinks about like the generational ways that you can build wealth. Because I also think that's wealth.
Yeah.
Right?
Less than 2 minutes to go, and I want to put this to Mitzi. Just as you had role models to help you on your journey through Queen's Park, you do understand that for young teenage Black girls, or, you know, young Black girls in their 20s, you're their role model, right? Your experience at Queen's Park may help open a door for them at some point in the future. How does that feel to you?
I welcome it. I attended my high school 60th anniversary at Winston Churchill Collegiate, which has the Leonard Braithwaite program. It's a Black excellence school.
This in Scarborough.
This is in Scarborough. And
I went to Cedar Brae, just putting it out there.
that's okay. That's okay.
Does that make you enemies?
No, we're
okay.
friends.
No, we're friends.
We're
We're
Scarborough
friends.
girls.
Totally.
And it's incredibly important that we show up for the younger generation. And what I love about our conversation today is just the diversity of what I see as excellent voices in their professions, in their craft, what they do. And what I want for the next generation is that they can grow up and see themselves without barrier or hindrance and choose their path. And that's really important, that they see themselves as belonging in whatever part of society and that they're not excluded. And so if that requires me to be out there and to put myself out there and to break through barriers, the first Black woman to lead a party in Ontario, or the first Black woman to be Minister of Education, I'm not going to be the last, because I know that others who look like me are just as capable of taking on these roles. Sometimes you just have to see someone else doing it to recognize your own potential.
That line is really true, isn't it? If you can see it, you can be it.
You can, yes.
That's a beautiful place to leave this discussion. Mr. Director, can I get a 5-shot of all our guests, please? I want to thank Nathan Andrews from McMaster University, Gerald Grant from Carleton University, Mitzi Hunter, Canadian Women's Foundation, the former Ontario Minister of Education, Tracy Moore, City TV host, Cheryl Thompson, Toronto Metropolitan University. Great to have all of you on TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
After the Second World War, Yugoslavia was unified under the communist rule of Josip Broz Tito. But by the early 1990s, it all came undone. What happened? Tonight, with our fourth installment of Forgotten War, we look at the collapse of the former Yugoslavia with someone who was there. Canada's first female infantry officer, Sandra Perrin. Forgotten War is produced in partnership with Canada Company.
They would use us as a shield, knowing that the other belligerent forces would not fire back, or sometimes they would, and we'd be collateral damage.
This is Sandra Perrin. She was Canada's first female infantry officer.
I had asked many times, can I go infantry, can I go airborne? And of course it had been denied because women were not in combat then.
In 1989, following a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling, the Canadian Forces permitted women in combat.
And as soon as they opened up, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in combat arms. I wanted to lead troops. I wanted to be in the front lines. It was my dream. Of course, they deployed a lot of actions that they felt would ostracize me and make sure that I wouldn't pass. Little things, seemingly, but as they accumulated, they became a mountain of rejection and harassment.
In 1992, Perrin was on a training mission that would later make headlines across Canada.
The idea was for me to be caught prisoner. A bag was put over my head. I was tied to a tree for many hours. At some points I was beat up. They wanted to see what I was made of. They wanted to challenge their own assumptions about women in combat. Are they going to cry? Are they going to break down? Are they going to scream? And I did none of those things.
It was in the middle of winter. Her shoes were taken off. Perrin was interrogated for hours.
And then I was released. I was so-called executed, mock execution, and I was released. The idea behind that was to test me, and I welcomed it at the time. It's like, let me show you what I'm made of. Let me show you how tough I am and what I can handle.
Perrin would pass infantry school at the top of her class. Her first deployment was in the former Yugoslavia, in Bosnia-Herzegovina.
The war broke out in early 1992. It was what I've always called a thug war, led by thugs.
After the Second World War, Yugoslavia and its 6 republics were unified under the communist rule of Josip Broz Tito. But by the early 1990s, a groundswell of nationalism and ethnic tensions erupted. First, Slovenia, and then Croatia declared independence. Then, Bosnia and Herzegovina, where Serbs, Bosnian Muslims, and Croats descended into civil war. The UN mission was to try to keep the peace among them.
Our mandate to keep peace when peace did not exist was very challenging. What peace is there to keep when they're firing each other and we're stuck in the middle with big white vehicles that have basically targets on them?
UN troops were also limited by the rules of engagement. They could fire only if they were directly fired upon.
When you get into a observation post or a position where they're aiming an RPG at you and you have to wait till we have effective fire to fire back, I mean, there won't be anything left to fire back if that thing goes off.
During her deployment, Perrin shared a tent with 8 other male officers.
So you have to remember that this was the first time a combat arms woman was deployed with troops. So the guys in the tent were very harsh. They were very open about their feelings towards having a woman in the tent, and they expressed it quite regularly. I didn't want to be in an operation cell in a safe command post leading just discussions about having patrols. I wanted to lead the patrol.
Perrin and her team received an urgent call. about an abandoned hospital for children with disabilities.
I begged my commanding officer to be on the next protection force to go into the hospital. We got to the hospital, and when I saw, first of all, the state of the children, it just baffled me that these kids had been left to their own accord for so many days and survived. The kids were in just desperate need of just water and food and caring and change of diapers. I immediately felt that need to take them in my arms and give them a little bit of love, knowing that they had not received anything like that. But I also had this feeling like, I'm the first woman in infantry. Can I afford to be a woman and have that that mothering side to me? What are soldiers going to think? They want a combat arms officer. And eventually I just gave in. I gave in to that natural instinct to hold those little babies in my arms and just give them a little bit of affection. They were so desperate to have it, and they would just put their arms around my neck and not let go, and I'd have to try and peel them away, and they'd hold on, and they were just so neglected. There were many instances during my tours, both of them, that I felt like this is why I wanted to do this career. This is why I wanted to lead troops. That one, I mean, I was proud to be in that hospital, but I was even prouder to have been able to dispatch troops that would find it in their hearts to protect these kids.
While back home, Perrin attended a lecture and sat beside a man she recognized. At the end of the lecture, he stood up.
Just gives a very eloquent and articulate speech on why women should not be in combat. After serving 6 months with me as his boss, immediately felt disappointment that there was still this idea that women couldn't be in combat arms when I had kinda proven myself. And you know, quite frankly, at that point, I even asked myself, do women have their place in combat arms? If we can't even get along with our peers, how are we going to command troops? Because by this point I had not commanded troops. I had commanded kind of other officers. I had managed other officers, so I didn't know.
In 1995, Perrin was redeployed to the former Yugoslavia, this time to Croatia. She was now an anti-tank platoon commander. She commanded 42 men.
In 1995, so the Serbs had taken quite a bit of the territory. The war was 3 years old. A lot of damage had been done on all sides of the belligerent forces. There were leaders that had done some atrocities.
In 1991, after Croatia declared independence, Serbs in the country rebelled. Along with Serbian troops, they launched attacks on Croatian cities and villages, and by the end of the year, controlled nearly a third of Croatian territory.
So we were, I guess, well trained by that time to know what we were getting ourselves into with regards to anti-tank mines and observation posts, and also the lack of respect towards the United Nations and the mission.
Perrin and her men were part of the UN's Operation Mandarin, aimed at monitoring the ceasefire of March 29, 1994. They patrolled the demilitarized zones with powerful cargo on board.
We had the most powerful weapons in all of former Yugoslavia, tow missiles.
Perrin and her second-in-command made a deal. They would never go on the same patrol in the event they hit a landmine or were attacked.
The vehicle is made to have about 10 to 12 tons of equipment. We had 14 tons, and because of that weight, we could not have the armor that normal vehicles could have to protect them. And so we were like naked out there.
On August 4th, Croatian forces launched a major offensive against the Serbs. At the time, it was the largest European land battle since World War II. Some fleeing Serbs found refuge at the UN headquarters.
So my platoon eventually got the task to protect the headquarters. The first thing we had to do is put a little order in the chaos in the camp. There were a lot of kids. There was 126 kids that needed attention. They needed to play. They'd been through traumatizing circumstances. They wanted to just be kids. We had very few toys and crafts for them, but one of the things that we did have were glow sticks that we'd use to mark trails in the dark. I went and grabbed a whole bunch, and some of my soldiers distributed them to the kids, and as soon as we broke them and they would glow, and the kids were terrified of holding them, thinking that they're going to get burned, but when they did, they were just in awe of these glow sticks, and they would throw them up in the air like they were fireworks. And then eventually the kids just got so tired, and they would go to bed holding their glow stick in the camp with smiles on their face.
Afterwards, Perron was called into the office of the man in charge of the entire contingent of UN troops in that region, Major General Alain Forain.
And all he could see were glow sticks, like just being thrown around because it was dark. He says, what the hell is going on in the camp? And I said, we gave kids the glow sticks, thinking I was going to be in trouble with this general. And he just with so much compassion and so much caring and so much leadership said, good job. Good on you to have that idea. And so I walked out of there just glowing. Out of all the moments in my career in the infantry, that was probably that moment that I knew I had my rightful place in combat arms. Not just because of the glow sticks, but because I had been around, and it started raining shortly after that. It was pouring rain. I was bringing coffee to my soldiers, having chats with them, and they were telling me about what they missed back home, and seeing those kids just happy for a short moment after the traumatizing events that they had been through. It just felt right. It just felt like I'm okay here. This is where I am at my best. I felt like this is where I'm supposed to be. I loved my guys. I loved working with them every day. I loved commanding and trying to be a good leader for them.
The Croatian offensive in the summer of 1995 effectively ended the Croatian War. And in December of that year, following a US-led NATO bombing campaign in Bosnia, the Dayton Accords were signed, ending the Bosnian War. Today, the former Yugoslavia is home to 7 countries. An estimated 130,000 people were killed in the Yugoslav wars for independence, many through deliberate campaigns of ethnic cleansing. 40,000 Canadian Forces personnel have served in the region. 23 were killed. After Perron returned home from Croatia, she soon realized her positive experience with her platoon was the exception to the rule. She decided to leave the military.
For my own dignity, for my own mental health, I had to leave. I don't want to spend another day defending my right to defend my country. I want to defend my country. I want to serve my country. I had no more tolerance, no more patience for that, because I knew.
That same year, the prisoner incident made national headlines.
You know, at the time, honestly, I didn't find anything wrong with it. I just thought, they're just testing me. It was only later when I realized my feet had been frozen. I still have problems to this day with my feet, that I understood the reasons behind it and the consequences and why it should have never happened that way. I had debunked all their myths about women. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that women had their place in the infantry and all combat arms.
Hera now runs the Pepper Pod, a non-profit, all-women's veterans center.
In the military, especially in combat arms, pepper potting is a military maneuver that aims to protect your buddy while you're moving towards the enemy. That's what we do here. We protect each other through the challenges of our life. Our mission is to give women a network of strong women to help them face the challenges that they have, particularly transition out of the military into civilian life.
Despite her experience, Perron still has faith in the Canadian Armed Forces.
I believe that they want to do the right things. Do they always know what that right thing is? I don't think so. We've been very blessed here. We had the Chief of Defense Staff, Wayne Eyre, General Eyre, with the top 20 generals come to the Pepper Pod, sit around this living room, and hear the themes that we hear over and over again from the 300 women that have been through our program. It's the themes about women's experiences and women's bodies and the equipment that's not designed for women's bodies, and pregnancy and menopause, and we talk about rape, and we talk about hard stuff. If they know, I think they can do better.
This video was made in partnership with Canada Company.
And that is the agenda for Thursday, November 7th, 2024. Join us tomorrow when John Michael McGrath and yours truly will bring you the latest from Queen's Park and probably some U.S. election stuff as well. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Tomorrow on the agenda.
The government could dissolve the legislature and call an election in something like January and February instead of bringing MPPs back after.
They normally come back around February.
They normally come back the week after Family Day in February. This person suggested that was not going to happen.
That's tomorrow on the agenda.